All right, guys. Today we are going to be talking about the actual atomic bombs that we used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's going to be a short, reading assignment where you have a couple of short pieces of reading, like actual primary documents to read. One is a scientific report from some scientists during the time talking about their opinion on whether or not we should have dropped the bomb or should drop the bomb, because I guess that was before. And then the other is a couple of short diary entries that President Truman made during the time of him making the decision to drop the bomb. So once we go over these couple of slides, I want you to read those couple of readings, start formulating your opinion. Those are located in Canvas. It is the assignment H-1. And then there is a video to watch called The World's Biggest Bomb. It's about 50 minutes, so if you need to break it up and watch it over a little bit of time, that is up to you. But there are test questions over that video, so you need to make sure that you watch it and that you are paying attention. There isn't necessarily an assignment to do with it, but we are going to reference it next week in addition to the short readings. We're going to reference all of those and kind of bring them together when we meet the first part of next week. All right. So looking at the nuclear bomb, my goal with this is to try and tap into some of your information from U.S. history. Hopefully you guys talked about some of this, but obviously with the COVID shutdown, I don't know how much information you actually got through. And so we're just going to kind of cover all bases today. So the Manhattan Project, hopefully you've heard of that. The Manhattan Project is the name of the top secret government operation to study nuclear physics and create the atomic weapons. It was called Manhattan for several different reasons. One of the main offices was located in Manhattan, which was kind of the main reasoning for it, but it was this top secret code name that wasn't really known until after the bombs were created and dropped. So it was a major military project starting in 1942 and ending in 1946, which would have been after we dropped the bomb successfully in 1945. And the project led to the weaponization of nuclear energy. So there had long been this conversation of, weapons advancing and bombs advancing, and then creating this new style of weapon that essentially used atomic energy and nuclear matter to create a more sustained and dangerous weapon. And everyone was kind of looking for this. It wasn't just the United States. So the United States was looking for it. Obviously, we were trying to help and work with Canada and Great Britain and France on this project. But the Nazis were also looking for this. The Russians were looking for this. The Chinese were looking for this. So it was a large project that a lot of people were looking for. And actually, one of the breakthrough scientists that helped us crack the scientific piece of it was a German Jew. Hopefully you've heard of him, named Albert Einstein. And Einstein was actually being hunted by the Nazis. Hitler had put a bounty out for Einstein to be captured on site and brought to command. And so that way Hitler could kind of pressure him and force him into creating this weapon for him. And thankfully, Einstein heard this through the grapevine, and he left Germany, came to the United States, got connected with the United States military and the United States government, and offered his services to help us create the weapon instead of the other way around. So once we had Einstein on board, he was really the mathematical and the science breakthrough that got us into the actual technological piece of creating these weapons. The head of the Manhattan Project was a man by the name of Robert Oppenheimer. He becomes known as the father of the atomic weapon. He becomes a really important piece to this entire puzzle also, and it's kind of a controversial piece as well. During the process, he was very on board, and it wasn't until after we tested the first bomb and then dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that he started to change his mind. When we tested the first bomb, codenamed Trinity, in Alamogordo, New Mexico, he actually sat down in a chair and was verbally abusing himself, saying, "Oh God, what have I done? What have we created?" And then later on in life, after we dropped the two bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he actually went on to be a very strong anti-nuclear weapon advocate for the United Nations. There are many sites located around the United States for the Manhattan Project. One of them being right here in Iowa. So Iowa State University served as a Manhattan Project location. They were the central place for kind of the Midwest to collect a lot of the radioactive material. And it is said that part of it was stored underneath the football field until it was needed, so it wasn't found by anyone else. At this point in time, it was the most expensive project in the United States history. It had employed more than 130,000 U.S. people, government people, military people, scientists, mathematicians, and engineers, etc. And at that point in time, it cost $126 billion, which if we expand that out, looking at inflation today, that would be this one thing, this picture that you see right here in the bottom right-hand corner, that one bomb, which is Trinity, which was a test bomb, which is the thing that we dropped in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Trinity at that point in time cost $126 billion to create. Again, with all the scientists and the research and collecting all the materials and things like that, if you use inflation markers today, $126 billion in 1945 equates to $1.9 trillion in 2021. So just talking about how expensive this project was to build, especially coming out of a Great Depression and in a wartime, it was an incredible feat to get us to create. So again, this bomb that you're looking at here, this is called Trinity. This is not what the majority of the bombs end up looking like. This was, again, the test subject. And so when we test Trinity in Alamogordo, New Mexico, we built a stand that was about 60 feet tall, made of steel. And then we had Trinity at the top of it. And the scientists had to, and the military officials had to get far enough away from it, or at least what they believed was far enough away from it before they detonated it. So they were about 2 to 3 miles away in an underground military bunker that had some glass windows for them to be able to see. And then they detonated Trinity. And so when Trinity detonated, again, we didn't really know what it was going to do. And so this was a science experiment, essentially. And so there are reports that a lot of those people that were in that underground bunker about 2 to 3 miles away looked around after Trinity, and they were able to see through each other's skin. And it was basically like they had X-ray vision for a couple of minutes. And it wasn't that their eyes were affected. It was more that there was so much radiation and bright lights because of the bomb that the radiation actually acted like an X-ray, because that is what you are having put on you when an X-ray is happening. It's why if you've ever had an X-ray, the other people in the room have those metal jackets to protect their organs and things like that, so they don't get radiation sickness or radiation poisoning or anything like that. But you are being hit with radioactive material during an X-ray, which is how we're able to see through your skin and see your bones. Same thing with a CAT scan and a PET scan and all those kind of things. Those are all different radioactive medical devices that basically do this same thing minus the bomb aspect, right? So all these scientists were able to stand around and basically look through each other and see each other's bones just because of the amount of radiation they were exposed to. Now, obviously, sadly, a lot of those people later on went on to contract cancer or later die because of that exposure. This is a common thing that you'd see around the military installations that were housing the Manhattan Project. So again, what you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. So these people were not allowed to tell their spouses, their kids, their family members. So much secrecy behind this project that actually the vice president at the time, Harry S. Truman, had no idea that this was even a thing. FDR was president in 1942, and up until the point of his death, he decided not to tell his vice president. It was that secret. So his wife knew because obviously when FDR got sick in 1945, she was making some of the decisions for him. We know that now. We didn't necessarily know that then as a public. But once he was sick and bedridden, she was making a lot of the decisions, especially some of the decisions for the atomic bomb. And the report is that Harry S. Truman is sworn in as president around 7 p.m. the day that FDR dies. And immediately after, they pull him into the Oval Office and basically unload all of this information and data on him and say, sir, we've been developing this weapon behind your back and you didn't know about it, but it's going to be basically your decision whether or not you drop it. And so again, that's going to tie into your assignment that you're going to complete later. So when we drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, these are the only two bombs ever to be used militarily in the world, and it essentially ends World War II. So some of your assignment's going to pick up some of the decision-making factors behind this, so I don't want to go too much into information about that because I want you to kind of figure that out on your own. But we did have two different bombs. One of them was a fission bomb. One of them was a fusion bomb. So Hiroshima, we codenamed Little Boy, and it was dropped on the city of Hiroshima. Its total population was 255,000, and it instantly killed 66,000 people. And again, those instantaneous deaths are going to be the ones that are vaporized, massive amounts of radiation poisoning that leads to death. And that 24-hour period is kind of how we mark that, and that's a 66,000 people deceased. Nagasaki, which takes place 2 days later, or 3 days later. I believe it's 3 days later, excuse me. Fat Man is what we named that one. And when we show you pictures of them later, it kind of explains why one was called Little Boy and one was called Fat Man. Nagasaki had a population of 263,000 and 35,000 people were killed instantly at that. All in all, I think within the first month or the first couple of weeks, there was about a 250,000 or about 250,000 people died from a result of these two attacks. These are just showing you before and after pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This would have actually been like a job that my grandfather would have done in the war. So my grandpa was a photographer in Des Moines before the war. And so once he enlisted, they used his photography skills on what they called bomb runs. And so a bomb run, for the photographer's job at least, is a 3-day process. So you would go out before the bombing, and take pictures of your target, which is going to kind of be like what you see here in picture number 1. You would go out during the bomb run and take pictures as the attack was happening. And then you would circle back a couple days after the attack to kind of see the damage, and like what you see here in the second picture on the right. So what you're looking at basically is the same area. You can see the mountains in the background. Here's like this church building or a building that has this steeple. And here's the same building right here. And again, the steeple right here. And so you can just see the total devastation of these two weapons. Or at least this is the Hiroshima weapon. So the total devastation that we're looking at. Same thing here. And what I want you to pay attention here is look at all the water. Remember, Japan is an island, and at its widest point, it's only 900 or 1,000 feet wide. 1,000 miles wide. And so there's a lot of waterways around here. And I want you to think about the Japanese main source of food is sushi and fish. And so not only did we destroy a lot of their land and a lot of their houses, but we also affected their water supply and killed a lot of their fish and food supply. So not only did we cause one problem, but we also caused more significant problems later on down the road. All right, again, here are those bombs that I was talking about. So this is Little Boy. This is the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It had never been tested. Testing was out of the question because it used all of the uranium-235 that we had produced at that point in time. And it was like no other bomb that had ever been built. But you can see that this is Little Boy. It's a lot longer than what Fat Man was. And I'll show you Fat Man right here in just a second. But the reason that we used two different types of bombs was, again, just a science experiment. We believed that after the first bomb, the Japanese would surrender. So we kind of told them ahead of time, we have this very dangerous weapon. You need to surrender. When they decided not to surrender after we dropped the first bomb on August 6th, we kind of gave them a day when they responded on August 7th or August 8th and said that they weren't going to surrender. We then kind of turned to what we call Fat Man. And this was a different type of bomb. Little Boy used uranium. Fat Man used plutonium. And this is the fusion weapon that I'll show you in a second. And so since we tested the fission type and the one with uranium, we also wanted to see what the plutonium or what the fusion bomb basically would do. So again, this was purely another science experiment, just happened to be carried out at a military act. So it was made with metal plutonium and surrounded by explosives. The explosives start that nuclear reaction taking place. And this is the same type of bomb that was tested in New Mexico. So again, this becomes the second bomb that we use, but we kind of knew what it did because we tested it already. And so Hiroshima was the original science experiment, and then Fat Man would have been the second experiment. But the first time that type of bomb had been dropped by a plane rather than dropped from a tower. Here you can see a model of both of them in the Atomic Museum. And then again, the different types of reaction. So this would be the fission bomb that we've already kind of talked about. So the TNT is loaded right here. This is the priming. And then you have two different pieces of uranium-235. And again, that's that process that we talked about the other day, where you're introducing an unstable piece of material into a stable piece of material, which causes that explosion to occur. And so that's what you kind of see here. The primer explodes the TNT shoots the smaller piece of uranium into the larger piece of uranium, causing this massive explosion. So Little Boy or Hiroshima was the fission process. Fat Man was the fusion process. And what that basically is you have fast-acting explosives and slow-acting explosives. And then the neutron is kind of in the middle of all that. You have this plutonium core that is surrounding the neutron. And then essentially the shock wave compresses everything. And so when this hits a surface, because this is typically what you would use for a surface bomb, when it hits the surface and everything kind of crumbles, kind of like you stepping onto like a pop can, and that center gets crushed. Once that neutron initiator and the plutonium core kind of mesh together, it causes the explosion to happen. They fuse into one piece. Then obviously the explosion happens with the fast-acting and the slow-acting explosives. So this would be the type of thing that you would do with a surface bomb, whereas a fission bomb would be an air burst, because the explosion is going to happen inside of the bomb and then causing the explosion to kind of take place after that. All right, so just two different types of two different weapons. All right, that is all we have going for us today. So again, hop on to Canvas, check out the assignment for the decisions to drop the atomic bombs, and then watch the video called The World's Biggest Bomb. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks.